Okay, so Deepak, awesome to do this together. We've known each other for how many years now?
Oh man, a dozen at least.
I think so. Yeah. And really appreciate our friendship. Thanks for making time for this. As we get started, why don't you kind of tell the audience what you do, what's your role right now? Let's start there.
Yeah, currently I am on my third venture-backed company. We are Sunrise AI, and we are an enterprise AI co-pilot for account managers. But real talk, because that's all like AI bullshit, like VC, Silicon Valley jargon. We just help customer success managers do their jobs better. We're an augmentation, not a replacement.
Love it. Okay, cool. Actually, we could dive into a little bit more, but give me
Yeah.
some examples of like workflows you support. So
Yeah.
I'm a customer success manager. How would I use Sunrise?
Yeah, I mean, think about what like a CSM does, right? They're at the top of their week or the beginning of their day. What are they doing? They spend 80% of the time combing through their CRM, figuring out who do I need to reach out to, where am I playing offense or defense? Offense meaning who can I upsell to, which customers are primed to get upsold to. Defense being, hey, who do I need to protect against churn? What renewals are coming up? What's the narrative I'm spitting? They're really planning out their day, figuring out where they can be the most efficient. Then they're spending the rest of their time executing, making those calls, sending out those emails, getting on the phone with customers and engaging with them meaningfully. We flip it. We leverage AI, pipe into whatever databases, typically the CRM a company has, and then using generative AI, come up with a playbook that CSM can use and that they can just tick through what they need to do. We provide them with all the information, what products are primed to be upsold to, which customers to reach out to, what's the messaging, what's the narrative, what's the rationale, and just give them a full-fledged assistant in terms of really powering their workflows.
Nice.
In a nutshell, a CSM, one of our customers, typical CSMs on the daily get about 10 to 12 touch points with their customer, their book of customers in a day. We're seeing 3x more output. So now they're doing like 30 touch points. So you can imagine the impact it has on ROI, from upsells to protecting against churn and all that. So we're literally just like super powering CSMs.
I love that. And I think we talked about this. There's not a lot of customer success management platforms, period, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of an underserved market. You don't really think about it, but there's so many hats that these folks wear.
100%.
And it's hard to also quantify sometimes, like, what is it you're doing? Is it like retention? Then you have a retention goal, then you like forget about expansion, right? So I think it's awesome. I think it's primed for that because it's like a lot more complex than people think it is.
100%. I mean, look, we've both been AEs, account executives, front end, like sales folks that are.
We get all the attention.
We get all the attention, all the glory. And for lack of a better phrase, like CSMs, account managers have really been seen as like a cost center or a kind of just set it and forget it. Once you win a deal, pass it off to the account manager. Now you do your thing. The responsibility is yours to maintain this customer, keep this customer. And you just mentioned it, like CSMs play a lot of different roles, right? They have to like code switch a lot. They are salespeople because they are trying to land and expand, get new business, new money, new revenue from customers. They're also playing customer support, right? Fielding when things are going wrong. They're also playing debt collector, pay your invoice, right? These are not easy roles to manage, maintain, or even apportion in terms of how one wants to balance their time. So they've really been in a function traditionally at enterprises where they've been underinvested in.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you're working on this space. Okay, so let's leave that for just a second. I want to now talk about what's your professional career been like? Because you didn't actually start in sales initially.
No.
So tell us about, okay, what was it like? You went to Stuyvesant High School, which we just talked about. You went to Penn, right?
No, oh my God, no.
Shit, wait, hold on, let me get this right. You went to, I should know this.
Well, I went to two colleges. I went to a small liberal arts school called Wabash College in Indiana, and then I also
know this. Okay.
then I attended the engineering school at Columbia here uptown. in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, I thought you went to Penn for some reason.
That's
I was
'cause
probably
you
thinking
paid
about
me
Penn
in-
Masala.
Well,
you know, like
to be
I was.
fair, all right. I'm gonna take that as a compliment.
Yeah, it is. 'Cause
But you probably, you're not far off. You know, in a former life, I was doing investment banking at Morgan Stanley, and
Yes.
maybe you affiliated that with finance, Penn, Wharton, those
Thanks
people.
for saving me. Thanks for saving me. But you're way cooler than that.
I had a much more derogatory term for Penn graduates. But yeah, those
Okay.
folks.
All right. So you went to Columbia. Tell us about Morgan Stanley. Why did you join? Because I was straight out of college, right?
Yeah, well, for a brief time I was at Deloitte Consulting, but I did start my career at Morgan Stanley. Honestly, the reason I joined Morgan Stanley was because it was the highest paying job I got. I had a shit ton of student loans in the pipeline. You know, I have a younger brother and sister. We're an immigrant family. You know, wanted to help them with their tuition ultimately. And I ended up staying at Morgan Stanley for almost a decade, which is a lot longer than I thought I'd be there.
It's impressive.
I don't think it's impressive. I think it was just, I think it was just circumstantial, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, it was an intellectually challenging job.
Sure.
I learned a shit ton. I really loved it. I enjoyed the work. You know, I'm an Excel monkey. I think the world is split into two people, and this is like maybe my 90s, 2000s, like, you know, old millennial coming out, but like, you know, people either think in like MS Word and prose, or they think in Excel. I'm definitely in that latter bucket. And
which explains why you went to engineering school, right?
yeah, I've always been an analytical kind of person. I just think of the world and categorize everything in my life in a spreadsheet. That sounds really sad, right? But I enjoyed the work, but it really was a function of just, I got these, you know, my own tuition to pay, my own loans to pay, my brother and sister, my parents' mortgage. So when all that was done, I kind of just woke up one morning. I was like, man, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And there was a straw that broke the camel's back. I was based in Hong Kong at the time, and it was the company Christmas party. I'm not sure if I've shared this story with you before.
I'm really interested in
And I remember that, and it's kind of like the Wild West. This was also pre-Me Too movement, just to be very transparent. That's the environment, the climate that we were in. And, you know, investment bankers have like a reputation to party hard, which I think is somewhat true, especially in Hong Kong, where it's like New York on steroids. Nightlife is popping, and it got crazy. Christmas party got crazy. And I remember our boss, the MD at the time that I was working for, he had just had a baby, and he came to the Christmas party, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, that's awesome that he's taking the time to spend time with the team, even though, like, obviously he has a newborn at home.
Sure.
And then I remember a few hours in, everyone's like obviously like more than a few drinks in, and I saw him on the dance floor with my assistant, and he was making out with her. And I was like, okay, it really made me question, is this the environment I'm choosing to be in?
That's sad.
Yeah, it's sad.
The story. Yeah.
It's very sad. And that really led to the motivation of like, okay, maybe I'm not a banker for life. Even though I've enjoyed this career, it's lucrative, I'm learning a lot. Is this where I want to situate myself? And the clear answer for me was no.
Yeah, and clearly, you're now a dad, right? You have 2 kids.
I'm a dad, I have 2 kids.
And you're not.
That's the hardest job ever, by the way, as you know.
I know. Yeah. Well, 2 kids is way different than 1. So.
2 kids is not 2x the work. It's like 5x the work.
Yeah, exactly,
I'll be honest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we're at 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyways,
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah.
you're like, okay, this is not for me.
Yeah.
And so how did Dropbox happen? Because Dropbox was after Morgan Stanley. I remember interviewing you.
Yes, Dropbox was after Morgan Stanley, but I did have like about an 8-9 month interlude. And
I didn't know this.
Yeah. It was a solopreneurship actually, not too dissimilar from what you're doing. Although I gotta say it was a little bit more fun. Don't get me wrong, sales is fun. No diss on you, Peter. But
what are you saying? I'm having fun.
yeah, no, of course. It was. I sort of found myself kind of just organically building this DJ and like music talent agency business. So before my time in Hong Kong, I had spent some time in Los Angeles, and I got somehow an old friend. I got to connect with him and his community, and they were all DJs. Now they weren't like the Avicii's of the world or anything like that, right? But they were kind of like the folks that would open up for like the Tiestos, right? And it was a cool crowd. It opened up my nightlife and social life in LA at the time.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Hong Kong, I had a good friend, and he was a music producer, DJ, and he's like, hey, I want to come visit you. By the way, if you're plugged into the nightlife scene in Hong Kong, maybe you can help get me some gigs and help subsidize my trip out there. Now that you're not at Morgan Stanley, I'm gonna come hang out for like 2 weeks and just party. I'm like, that sounds like a great idea. obviously bachelor days, right?
Yep.
So I kind of just started cold calling a bunch of venues, putting together a deck, like a media package for him, and then pitched him as a DJ that they should hire for a night or two.
Wow.
And that sort of snowballed into him plus others in his community, and I became their POC in Asia to bring DJs and like music talent to like venues across the region, from like New Delhi, Bangkok, Singapore, Taiwan, like it was pretty fun. And it was like, and then I started building these relationships with these venues where they would just call me like, hey, we have an event going on, can you bring someone from the States? And it's kind of how I paid my bills, and it was fun.
Wow.
I wish I had started that business at like 23, not 33. Right?
Because the lifestyle is probably hard to keep
Lifestyle is hard to keep up with. I was having tons of fun, but a place like Hong Kong is like, you can live like a Peter Pan type lifestyle, right? That's one of the reasons why I wanted to leave, is because I found that I was doing, every weekend was the same. What I was doing at 28 was the same I was doing at 33, and I could see that it's probably what I'd still be doing at 38. And ultimately, I didn't want to be the 40-year-old at the club. So I was like, let me move back and make my mom happy and settle down at some point. But I wasn't ready to settle down yet.
Even at Dropbox, right?
No, I think you were witness / an enabler.
I know. I'm sorry. I'll try not to get there.
Don't be sorry. It was good times.
It was awesome. Good memories. Okay, so tell me about Dropbox, because that was your first tech sales experience.
Yeah. It was a little bit unexpected. I remember I had come to San Francisco just to visit some friends, and I linked up with some folks, common friends of ours, Ajay, Jeff Gato, and them. They're old MS colleagues of mine from Morgan Stanley. And they were like, hey, if you're like looking for your next thing, you should really check out Dropbox. And I had heard of Dropbox, and at that time it was still very much, I wouldn't say it was a household name yet, right? And I was like, look, Ron, what would I do at a tech company? Like, yeah, I have engineering experience, but I haven't written a piece of code at that time in like 15 years. They're like, well, have you thought about sales? And it was interesting because at that time, and you were one of the folks that incepted the enterprise sales team, it was the argument in my head. I was like, look, if I've spent my career as an investment banker selling services to gray-haired CFOs, perhaps I can sell tech to gray-haired CTOs. And that was an appealing proposition for me. And especially from my investment banking days, once you reach a certain level, the job converts from just kind of being an Excel monkey, being behind a laptop, running analytics, producing decks, to a sales job. And it was sort of a natural transition. And that's when I was like, all right, sign me up. And you and the rest of the team were gracious enough to welcome me.
And I think there were like less than a handful of us, right, on the enterprise side.
I think maybe 5, 6 at the time, not even.
It was very early. So tell me about, how did you learn sales at Dropbox, like that type of sales? And what was your thought process on like absorbing, okay, this is now how I shift from Morgan Stanley to selling to like IT and security? Like, what did you do?
The immediate answer that comes to mind is that it was very much an apprenticeship, right? You can read sales books, and one should. There's a lot of valuable like gems in those types of materials, right? But I think just listening to folks speak, being in pitches, and witnessing how folks are doing the selling. How do you position the product? How do you listen? More so than speaking, how do you listen to customers or prospective customers? And also not like force fitting shit. Like sometimes a customer is not ready, or the product's not ready, or you don't need to be compelled to oversell. If there's a fit, great. It should, and I think I've learned like it should feel like easy and organic and natural, not something that's like a grind. If it's a grind, to me that's a signal like this is not the right fit. And like there's enough fish in the sea, so go hunt another fish where it does fit, where your hook does fit, right? So it was really by, getting back to your original question, it really was by just observing, learning, sitting next to folks, and just kind of through osmosis, right? I don't think there was like a formal training about it, but it really was through osmosis that enabled sort of a mentality shift in terms of how do I approach and prospect and speak, pitch and close enterprise IT folks.
Yeah. I like what you said about listening and then not selling the world. I just said that at the founder lunch, actually. You need to find the innovators, especially what we were selling. It was a consumer brand trying to get into enterprise. So there weren't a lot of companies ready for us, to be honest.
Not at all.
I'm glad you said that. So did you, because when I was at Dropbox, I took Sandler training from Guru Ganesh, and then I also took training from John Barrows. Did you partake in any of those?
I think I did briefly. The names are familiar, so I'm sure I did, but I'm also like old as fuck, so it's very likely that it's just not in my head anymore.
But the point is, like, you don't really maybe remember those sessions, even if you were in them, like the training
Correct.
sessions.
I don't remember those training sessions.
Okay.
Now, do I remember attending training sessions? Yes. I will be honest, I don't necessarily remember employing those tactics like seamlessly. And what I mean by that is, it's not like I went to a training session, all right, points 2, 3, 5, this is what I need to do for my job, and then I took those points 2, 3, 5, and then applied them. Like, it wasn't like, connecting the dots A to B to C.
Yeah.
Perhaps just sitting in those sessions, listening, I absorbed certain methodologies and approaches, so I'm not diluting those experiences.
Right.
But for me, there wasn't a direct impact that I can recognize. But fair enough, it's like, 12 years later.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There wasn't like a playbook you could map, right? So, and you remember your deals probably a lot more than you remember the training sessions.
Oh, 100%.
So can you tell me about, like, what is your sales style?
Yeah.
And how does it map to, maybe a couple deals that you close at Dropbox?
Yeah. I think my sales style is, I'll say two things. I'll start macro, then come micro. From a macro perspective, I think your sales style should match one's like organic or intrinsic personality. I think there's multiple styles of selling, right? And all of them work. Some work better than others, depending on the customer you're pitching to, right? At Dropbox, I think I naturally took my style that I had bred or grown as an investment banker for a decade to tech sales, and it was very relationship oriented, right? So my first couple meetings, I recall vividly, like, I didn't even have an agenda where I'm like, this is what I'm selling, right? I don't mean that I didn't have an agenda. Of course, you need to come with structure. You have to come in like being confident, knowing your shit, being organized. You want to put your best foot forward, so you can't come in all like, frazzled and just, hey, I'm just gonna shoot the shit and have a coffee chat. Yeah. There's moments for a coffee chat, but if you're in a meeting, you do want to set up front, like, what are we talking about? Why are we meeting? What are you looking for? I want to understand what your problems and pain points are. And yes, maybe there'll be some airtime for me to present what I have as a solution. And perhaps those solutions may fit and help solve your problems. Perhaps they won't. But I never, in the first couple of meetings, especially at an enterprise level, I never go in assuming like, this is a playbook, I'm gonna tick through these 5 things, this is a demo I'm gonna do, and then either they're gonna sign or not. Like, I don't think that, at least for me, would work. Just my style. I'm very relationship oriented. I really wanna understand 2 things. Is there a problem? Does a problem even exist, right? 2, what is the impact of that problem on this person? Not the company, not the product, not even the problem they're solving. What is the impact on that person, that person's job, ultimately that person's career, that person's livelihood? Like, how does this problem impact their day to day, right? Yeah. And having a deep comprehension, and most importantly, a curiosity around it, like an authentic curiosity. That's what builds, I think, the connection and the relationship, where then at some point later on, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th follow-up, you can actually have a constructive, engaging conversation about, hey man, well, now that we've talked about your job and your livelihood, let's talk about my job and my livelihood. Yeah. But that's a conversation that I find prospective customers are very open to after you've taken the time to actually listen to them.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you need to understand their problem, right? Like, it's almost like the anti-sales approach, actually.
100%.
And you mentioned one word which I talk about with enterprise sellers and founders is assumptions. That's the most dangerous thing in sales. If you make assumptions coming into a situation, it's more about how you offer off-road, right? And then the other thing is, I love that you brought up that trust factor.
Yeah.
It is really like a human-to-human thing.
Yeah.
It's very different as somebody trying to get promoted at a company versus not get fired. That
Totally
impacts the decision-making, you know, like the disposition of that, right? So I love that you brought that up. Okay, so that very much jives with my style, as you know, which is part of why we get along. Now you're doing founder-led sales, right? Sunrise is how many employees?
It's just two of us.
Yeah, so you are
2.5, I should be fair.
Okay, nice. Okay, yeah.
2.5
We won't tell the
FTEs for the
half
technical.
person.
You're just half the person to me. No.
So now you're doing founder-led sales.
Yeah.
Like, what are the parallels and what's different?
Yeah.
Maybe there is not as much difference as you thought. Maybe there is. Like, what is it? What is that like for you? What is founder-led sales for you right now? And how do you operate? Maybe similarly and then also differently.
Great question. Founder-led, I'll start with the definition. Founder-led sales to me is literally trying to do one of the hardest things ever, which is like 0 to 1. So what does 0 to 1 actually means? To me, I think about it very quantitatively, like I'm an Excel person. 0 to 1 is like, can you be the first to put points on the board, right? That's an extremely tough thing to do, right? Because there isn't a track record to speak to. There aren't case studies to refer to. The only way you can actually get to from 0 to 1 is a customer believing in you. Not even believing in the product, not even believing, I think, in your team. They're believing in you as a founder to essentially will a product and then ultimately value into play, right? And that's a really tough thing to do if you go in with your standard tech sales playbook. So where the parallel was to the Dropbox experience is actually not too dissimilar, right? We were at that time trying to push an enterprise product, and quite frankly, the product was not enterprise ready or enterprise grade, right? And there's two kind of buckets. One is like technical, like large IT organizations need sort of standard enterprise grade security, for example, right? They need the SOC 2 Type 2s, ISO 27001s, and you can't even get a conversation sometimes without having those. But then I think as important, if not more important, I think there's a double, triple click into the relationship aspect, right? I can't think of any deal that was brought in, not even speaking me, I'm thinking of your deals actually, right? That were brought in where there wasn't the cornerstone of the contract was the individual relationship that you as an account executive had with that ultimate buyer and decision maker. Oftentimes the buyer, the end user, the decision maker are all three different people. You have a buyer that's your internal champion and pushing a deal through, the decision maker who's typically his or her boss, and then the end user, which is sometimes just way down the totem pole where you may not even talk to, right? So like it's a very complicated matrix or web or whatever you want to call it. And to navigate that, you need to build relationships, and that relationship building has to be authentic and genuine, right? So in that manner, founder-led sales, I think it's damn near impossible to go from 0 to 1 without proper relationship building, without customers believing in like you as an individual. That's the parallel.
Yep.
Where it's very different, and I don't know if this is common for other founders, but I've made this mistake in my past two companies where we built like a thing, spent a lot of money, spent a lot of time, energy, and effort from the team, and then really tried to force fit a sale, because now we have the pressure, whether it's external stakeholders like investors, whether it's making payroll, whether it's the team, just showing that this thing that they spend so much time, their blood, sweat, and tears in creating, can you actually go monetize on it? There's a lot of pressure to go make that thing work, right? Like I built this thing, now I gotta sell this can, right? But I did that, quite frankly, and mistakenly so, without really vetting the buyer, without knowing if a buyer is this thing that I built gonna solve a problem or not. And I found myself moving away from that relationship to like, oh man, I just need to sell these things, right? And that does work, kind of works. Maybe you can get some deals through, but I don't think that's a long-term sustainable process or approach. Whereas today, thankfully, I think more than what I've learned, I think I've learned what not to do.
Sure.
And our approach for this go around for Sunrise AI has been, let's sell before we build. So even before I had anyone write a piece of code, I made damn well sure that I have a buyer ready to sign a contract.
I love that. I've heard this time and time again with founders actually, where they feel like they were way too product oriented, not buyer oriented. And so they went into this rabbit hole of making assumptions on the product that ended up not becoming true.
100%.
Right? And the other thing I think that happens is you have imposter syndrome. You're like, I can't sell this thing if I don't have it. But to your point, they're buying your vision too, not just your product. And your vision is fully baked, obviously, right? Because you've been thinking about this for ages. So I love that you said that and that you're actually like incorporating that. This has been awesome. Like, let's talk now about kind of just sales in general, because you've been pitched too, right? So like, let's get outside of like the Deepak salesperson.
Yeah.
What do you think, like when you're looking at, and you've already touched on some of these things, but like, what do you tactically see sellers do who are like great at what they do? You know, like obviously the relationship building, but are there like specific instances where, oh wow, like, that was cool to see from the seller?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And look, for better or for worse, because, you know, I think sales has evolved quite a bit from at least when I started a dozen years ago, right?
Like, we were at Dropbox in 2012.
Right? Like, we combed LinkedIn in a very analog fashion. We found some, like, I don't know, hunter.io and figured, like, what is the email? We would pick up the phone and call. Like, it was very analog and manual. And now you have, you know, AI-enabled services, you have enrichment services, then you have automated campaigns and sequences. I will say, and yes, I'm a buyer of technology myself. I have my own company. I employ a tech stack. So yes, I am a B2B SaaS purchaser.
Totally.
And what's worked with me? It's a great question. I'll tell you first what's not worked.
Yeah, I love
when
that.
it's
That's
when
better.
right when it's generic, when I know I'm part of a campaign sequence, I have an immediate turn off, right? And perhaps that's also, if I'm like reflecting upon this and becoming a little bit more aware of it, it's probably because it's so antithetical to like my own mainstay of like being very relationship oriented, right? Like it's so at the other end of the spectrum. I'm like, I'm literally one of 1,000. Like, you don't give a shit about me and you actually don't even care about my problem. You're assuming I have a problem, right? So I immediately like delete or don't even read it. Now, what has worked though, I have to say, is if you've taken the time to get a warm intro, even if it's like a friend of a friend of a friend, that like, I will always take those calls or meetings or reply. Because if someone said like, hey, I talked to this person and this person said I talked to you, like that shows like they really took the time, energy, and effort to like figure out where I'm at, what potentially may be my problems. It's okay to make assumptions, but where people fall off is if they don't try to validate or invalidate those assumptions, right? And if they come with curiosity, do you have this problem? Versus like, you have this problem, I have a solution, let's get on the phone, right? That to me is a marker of like, you've done your homework, I'm willing to even give you 5 minutes and hear what your pitch is. And it doesn't have to be a hard pitch, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's just like, you know.
And you know when you're getting on these calls that you will be pitched.
I will be pitched, it's fine. We all know what we're walking into, right?
The
The other thing I will also say is what doesn't work is when people are like very generic, even if it is a customized outreach, but they're generic. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? But like, I almost prefer the opposite. Just tell me just tell me what you want from me. I'm way more likely to give you what you want if you just straight out tell me, hey, I'm XYZ, I'm looking for this. Can I get this from you? Whatever it is. It might be my time, it might be a reference, it might be whatever. But if you're direct in one line and ask me, this is what I want, can you give it to me? I'm like 10x more likely to be a lot more amenable.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the 15-minute thing just doesn't work because people think it's frictionless for you because it's just 15 minutes. But 15 minutes is a lot of time, first of all. Never ends up being 15 minutes. And oftentimes as a buyer, you actually want friction in the process, right? Counter to popular belief, but you want to put some thought into something you're about to purchase, right?
Totally.
So it just makes it like you're just devaluing yourself. So that's really helpful. Okay, so let's start to wrap this up. This is super awesome, by the way.
No, thank you. Thank you for
since I also do want to post this to the founder-led sales community, you've already given some advice, but what are one or two things you would say to folks who are like in the early stages
Yeah.
of building a company? You've already mentioned that, hey, like, don't be afraid to sell before you build.
Yeah.
Or do it in parallel at the very least.
Yeah.
What other piece of advice do you have for folks who are first-time founders
Yeah.
building their company, like let's say less than 5 employees, trying to get their product out into the world? Any like words of wisdom or inspiration?
Yeah. Over-index on transparency, right? Like, just be transparent, both on product and team and what your abilities and capabilities are, right? I don't think, and like, yes, don't oversell. That's also generic advice. But what I mean more tactically is, hey, I don't have any customers. I'm looking for my first customers. You, hopefully, can be my first customer. And that actually is a boon for founder sales, especially when you're going from 0 to 1, because there's a lot, most prospective customers, when you're making assumptions on who your customers are, customer profiles are, that's the way to weed them out. A lot of folks are not early adopters, so they're just not gonna be down to try something new, so don't waste your fucking time. Mm-hmm. So you tell them, you're gonna be my first customer.
Yeah.
Are you down for that? If you're not, no love lost. I'm gonna go keep trying to find someone who is down for that. Mm-hmm. So I think that transparency goes a long way. But also, like, as you know, in enterprise sales, it's a sales cycle for a reason. It could take 3 months, 6 months, 18 months, right? We've all been at that shit end of the deal where it's just elongated. You know, I had a co-founder breakup recently, and granted, it is no matter what, it's never frictionless, right? And I made the decision proactively to tell my first set of customers, hey, my technical co-founder has left. This is the impact on the product. This is what I'm doing right now to mollify that impact. These are my intentions. Now, I could have faked the funk and just glossed it over. I didn't need to, or I didn't have to be compelled to tell them. Even folks that signed a contract with me. I can just say, like, yeah, don't worry, our deliverables, we're gonna still follow the SOW, our deliverables are intact. But I chose to tell them, like, look, I had a co-founder breakup. This may actually put a hiccup on our timeline. I wanna be very upfront with you. I'm solving it, I'm on it. And like, I don't think, I had that conversation with about 5 different customers, and they were my first batch, you know, my design partner cohort. And it was actually, I mean, honestly, it was like, I'm not emotional. I was like, they were so supportive. Like, their first question back to me was like, are you okay? Forget about like the deal, forget about the product. And this guy goes to like, that's why like you build a relationship in an authentic way, where a person, you actually have a mutual interest in each other as just human beings. So that, I love that was their first question, making sure I was okay. And the second was like, look, I'm gonna do everything in my power to make sure that you look good, and whatever we agreed to and you signed up for, I'm delivering, right? And one of the responses I got was from this customer. He was like, look, I don't care, I fucks with you. And that, it's so weird, I fucks with you. That like made me feel so much better. Right?
It goes back
transparency, ultimate transparency. It's something that I tell my 6-year-old daughter. You will never get in trouble for telling the truth.
Totally. And it simplifies things, right? Yeah, same thing that Lenny said from MBC. He's like, he knows as an enterprise buyer that there will be hard times with the vendor. The question is, who does he want to go through those hard times with?
Yeah.
And you know, that population of people is pretty small.
It's
you
trust.
Know, for enterprise buyers, right? It's still a very human to human craft. Which we often forget about now with like the age of AI. So dude, this is awesome.
Thank you, man. This is great.
Thank you for doing this.
No. Thank you
we'll
for just even having a chat
at some point.
Always.
You know? But appreciate it, man. Check out Sunrise AI for those of you who have customer success teams that have the problems Deepak talked about. Sweet. All right, appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.